In the vast expanse of the Galactic Empire, where species from 1,000 worlds bow before the crystalline throne of Emperor Vextar, power flows through bloodlines as ancient as the stars themselves. Yet sometimes, the greatest strength lies not in those who command fleets or wield plasma swords, but in those who see what others choose to ignore. When a human janitor from the forgotten world of Terra becomes the only witness to Princess Lyra's extraordinary abilities, he sets in motion events that will challenge everything the galaxy believes about worth, power, and the dangerous beauty of being underestimated. This is the story of how the smallest acts of recognition can topple empires, and how humanity's greatest gift isn't our technology or our weapons, it's our ability to see potential where others see only disappointment. Marcus Chen had been cleaning the Imperial Palace for 3 years, and, in all that time, he had learned one fundamental truth about power: the more someone had, the less they noticed the people who kept their world functioning. His human hands, calloused from years of maintenance work, moved with practiced efficiency as he guided the hover mop across the polished obsidian floors of the eastern wing. The corridor stretched before him like a river of black glass, reflecting the bioluminescent strips that provided the palace's eternal twilight ambience. The Vextari Empire had conquered 1,200 worlds, subjugating species that ranged from the crystalline Zelkar to the gaseous Morvani collective. Humans, discovered only 40 years ago on their small blue world called Terra, ranked somewhere near the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. Not because they were weak, though many species were stronger. Not because they were stupid, though others were more technologically advanced. Humans were dismissed because they were ordinary. In a galaxy filled with species that could manipulate gravity with their minds, breathe in the vacuum of space, or live for millennia, humans were frustratingly, completely normal. Marcus had never minded being overlooked. It gave him access to places and conversations that others never witnessed. Today, as he cleaned the approach to the Imperial Council chamber, he could hear the familiar sound of Emperor Vextar's disappointment echoing through the massive doors. Lyra demonstrates no exceptional abilities whatsoever. The Emperor's voice carried the distinctive harmonic resonance of the Vextari, a sound like wind chimes made of starlight. Her brothers have already shown mastery over stellar manipulation and temporal displacement. At her age, I could bend light itself to my will. She cannot even manage basic levitation. Marcus paused in his cleaning, not out of deliberate eavesdropping, but because he had learned to freeze whenever the Emperor's tone turned cold. Experience had taught him that sudden movements during Imperial displeasure could result in being noticed, and being noticed by Emperor Vextar was never a good thing for anyone, especially humans. "Perhaps she is a late bloomer, my lord," came the voice of Grand Admiral Kethran, the Emperor's chief military advisor. His species, the Kethani, were known for their diplomatic skills, though Marcus had observed that their diplomacy usually involved agreeing with whoever held the most power. Late bloomer? Emperor Vextar's laugh was like crystal breaking in slow motion. She is already past the age when Vextari abilities manifest. No, Kethran, we must face the truth. Princess Lyra is defective. A disgrace to the Imperial bloodline. Marcus found himself gripping his mop handle tighter. He had seen Princess Lyra during his cleaning rounds, a slight figure who moved through the palace like a ghost, always walking in the shadows cast by her more impressive siblings. Prince Zyxtar could literally fold space around himself, stepping from one end of a room to another without crossing the distance between. Prince Morval could manipulate time flows, aging materials to dust with a gesture or reverting them to their original state. Princess Lyra walked everywhere like a common being, opened doors with her hands, and spoke in whispers that barely carried beyond her immediate vicinity. "What are your orders regarding the princess, my lord?" Grand Admiral Kethran asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Minimal resources. Minimum attention. She will have her basic needs met, but I will not waste the Empire's time on a failure. Focus our efforts on preparing her brothers for leadership roles. Perhaps we can arrange a marriage alliance with one of the Outer Rim species, someone who won't look too closely at her limitations." The conversation continued, but Marcus forced himself to resume cleaning, moving his mop in broad strokes across the floor. The Emperor's words settled in his mind like a weight. He had grown up on Terra during the early days of integration with the galactic community, and he remembered his grandmother's stories about children who were dismissed, overlooked, or written off too early. His grandmother had been a teacher, and she used to say that the most dangerous mistake an adult could make was assuming they understood a child's potential. 20 minutes later, as Marcus finished cleaning the eastern corridor, he saw Princess Lyra herself walking toward him. She moved with the peculiar grace that he had noticed before, not the otherworldly gliding of her father or the reality-bending swagger of her brothers, but something quieter, more intentional. Her appearance was distinctly Vextheri, tall and willowy with pale blue skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, large eyes that shifted color like oil on water, and the characteristic cranial ridges that marked imperial bloodline. But, unlike her family, she seemed to take up less space somehow, as if she were trying not to disturb the air around her. "Excuse me," she said as she approached, her voice soft but clear. Most beings in the palace never addressed the cleaning staff directly, communicating through gesture or simply expecting their presence to be accommodation enough. Marcus stopped and nodded respectfully. "Yes, Your Highness?" Princess Lyra paused, seeming almost surprised that he had responded directly to her. "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me, Your Highness?" Marcus kept his voice carefully neutral, the way he had been trained during his orientation. "Never show confusion, curiosity, or familiarity with royalty. Answer questions, follow instructions, remain invisible." "For cleaning the memorial garden so carefully," she said. "I know it's just another assignment for you, but my mother loved that garden. She designed it herself before she died. When I see how thoughtfully you tend to it, how you make sure every bioluminescent plant is properly positioned to honor her memory, it means something to me." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. The memorial garden was indeed just another assignment to him, a weekly task that involved cleaning the pathways, adjusting the light strips, and ensuring the exotic plants from across the galaxy remained healthy. But now, knowing that those plants held personal significance, that his work was actually maintaining someone's connection to their lost parent, the task felt different. "I'm honored to maintain it, Your Highness. I'll make sure it continues to reflect her vision." Princess Lyra smiled, and, for just a moment, her eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. "You see things that others miss, don't you? Details that matter?" It was an odd question, and Marcus wasn't sure how to respond without overstepping boundaries. "I try to do my work thoroughly, Your Highness." "No, it's more than that." She stepped closer, and Marcus caught a scent like ozone after lightning, which he had learned was natural to the Vextheri. "You notice things. Like how the Morvani delegate always pauses by the windows facing their home system during diplomatic meetings. Or how Ambassador Zelkar arranges his crystal formations in patterns that correspond to his emotional state. Or how my father's voice changes pitch by exactly 3 harmonics when he's about to make a decision he doesn't like." Marcus stared at her, feeling suddenly exposed. Those were all things he had indeed noticed during his cleaning rounds, small observations that helped him navigate palace politics and avoid problems. But he had never mentioned them to anyone, never even consciously acknowledged that he was making such detailed observations. "You watch," Princess Lyra continued, "and you understand. Most beings here see only what they expect to see, only what fits their assumptions about how things should be. But you see what actually is." "I'm not sure I understand, Your Highness." "My father sees a defective daughter because I don't demonstrate the same abilities as my brothers. The court sees a disappointment because I don't manipulate reality in obvious ways. But you." She paused, studying his face with those shifting, oil-slick eyes. "You see someone who's different, not someone who's broken." The moment stretched between them, and Marcus felt like he was standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous. Royal family members did not have philosophical conversations with human janitors. They did not share personal observations or seek validation from cleaning staff. This conversation was heading toward territory that could get him reassigned to mining operations on some distant asteroid, or worse. But something in Princess Lyra's expression stopped him from making polite excuses and backing away. There was a loneliness there that he recognized, a specific kind of isolation that came from being constantly measured against standards that didn't fit who you actually were. "With respect, Your Highness," he said carefully, "different isn't the same as defective." Her eyes widened slightly, and, for just a moment, the air around her seemed to shimmer. Marcus felt a strange sensation, like a gentle breeze against his mind, warm and oddly comforting. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she was walking away, moving down the corridor with that same intentional grace, leaving Marcus standing with his mop and a growing certainty that he had just witnessed something important, even if he couldn't yet understand what. The rest of his shift passed uneventfully, but Marcus found himself thinking about the conversation as he cleaned. Princess Lyra's observations about his attention to detail had been unnervingly accurate. He did notice things, the way beings moved, the patterns in their behavior, the small tells that indicated mood or intention. On Terra, his teachers had called it being perceptive. Here in the galactic community, it seemed like just another unremarkable human trait. But Princess Lyra had seen it as valuable. More than that, she had seemed grateful for it. 2 days later, Marcus was cleaning the palace archives when he encountered her again. The archives were usually deserted. Most beings had neural interfaces that allowed them to access information directly without the need for physical research. But Princess Lyra was there, sitting at one of the ancient reading stations with actual physical books spread around her like a paper fortress. "Your Highness," Marcus said quietly, not wanting to disturb her but needing to acknowledge her presence. She looked up from her reading, and again he was struck by those eyes that seemed to shift color depending on her mood or the light. Today they appeared more silver than oil slick. "Marcus, isn't it? Marcus Chen from Terra?" The fact that she knew his name sent a small shock through his system. "Yes, Your Highness. I've been reading about your species," she said, gesturing to the books around her. "Fascinating. According to these records, humans were initially dismissed by the galactic community as having no special abilities. No natural telepathy, no reality manipulation, no extraordinary physical capabilities. But the more I read, the more I realized that evaluation missed something crucial." Marcus remained silent, unsure where this was leading. "Humans excel at pattern recognition," Princess Lyra continued, picking up one of the books. "Your species can observe complex systems and identify connections that aren't immediately obvious. You can predict behavior, adapt to new situations, and find solutions that don't rely on raw power or special abilities. Some of these reports suggest that human strategic thinking helped resolve conflicts that had lasted for centuries. I'm just a janitor, Your Highness." "Are you?" She stood up, moving around the reading station toward him. "Or are you a human who notices that the Morvani delegate's gaseous form shifts density when he's lying? Who understands that Ambassador Zelkar's crystal arrangements indicate whether he's feeling cooperative or hostile? Who can read the emotional undercurrents in my father's voice?" Marcus felt that same sensation of standing at the edge of something dangerous. "Your Highness, I don't understand what you're asking." "I'm asking if you see me," she said simply. "Not as a failed princess, not as a disappointment to the imperial bloodline, not as a defective Vextheri who can't live up to her heritage. I'm asking if you see me as I actually am." And, in that moment, looking at Princess Lyra surrounded by ancient books in the forgotten archives, Marcus realized that he did see her. He saw someone who spent her time researching rather than practicing flashy abilities because she understood that knowledge was its own form of power. He saw someone who moved carefully through the palace not because she was weak, but because she was observing, learning, understanding the complex dynamics that governed this vast empire. He saw someone who had been dismissed and underestimated so thoroughly that she had become effectively invisible, which meant she had access to information and perspectives that no one else possessed. "I see someone who's been preparing," he said quietly. Princess Lyra smiled, and this time the shimmer in the air around her was unmistakable. For just a moment, Marcus felt like he could perceive the thoughts and emotions of every being in the palace, a vast network of consciousness that stretched through the building like a living web. "Now you're beginning to understand," she said. "The question is, what are you going to do with that understanding?" Before Marcus could respond, the shimmer faded, leaving him standing in the archive with a princess who looked perfectly ordinary, surrounded by books that suddenly seemed less like leisure reading and more like intelligence gathering. "I should let you get back to your work," Princess Lyra said, but there was something in her tone that suggested this conversation was far from over. As Marcus resumed his cleaning, moving through the archives with mechanical precision, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything in his life was about to change. Princess Lyra wasn't defective or powerless, she was something else entirely. And, somehow, his ability to see that fact had made him a participant in whatever she was planning. The rest of the palace continued its daily routines around him, a vast machine of power and politics and interstellar governance. But Marcus Chen, human janitor from Terra, now knew that someone was watching the watchers, learning from the learned, and preparing for something that none of them expected. He just wished he understood what that something was going to be. Marcus discovered what Princess Lyra was preparing for exactly 1 week after their conversation in the archives. He was cleaning the observation deck that overlooked the palace's central courtyard when he witnessed something that changed his understanding of the imperial family forever. The courtyard was hosting the monthly demonstration of imperial power, a ritual where the emperor's children displayed their abilities for visiting dignitaries. Prince Zyxdar went first, stepping into the center of the vast space and raising his arms. Reality folded around him like origami made of starlight. One moment he stood at the courtyard's center, the next he was simultaneously at all 4 corners, his form split across space without losing coherence. The assembled diplomats and nobles clicked, chirped, and hummed their appreciation in a dozen different languages. Prince Morval followed, manipulating time itself. He selected a decorative fountain and aged it rapidly, watching centuries of wear occur in seconds. Then, he reversed the process, the ancient stone becoming fresh and new, the weathered carvings returning to crisp perfection. The crowd's approval was even more enthusiastic. Princess Lyra was announced last, and Marcus watched from his position on the observation deck as she walked to the center of the courtyard. She stood there for a long moment, perfectly still, while the crowd waited for her demonstration. The silence stretched, becoming uncomfortable. Marcus could see Emperor Vextar's posture growing rigid with embarrassment. Then, Princess Lyra raised her hand, and nothing visible happened. The crowd began to murmur in confusion. Several diplomats looked toward the emperor, uncertain whether this was some subtle demonstration they were failing to appreciate or simply the confirmation of rumors about the defective princess. Emperor Vextar's bioluminescent patches began flickering with the rapid patterns that indicated extreme displeasure. But Marcus, watching from above, noticed something that the ground-level observers missed. As Princess Lyra stood motionless with her hand raised, every single member of the crowd below began moving in perfect synchronization. Not obviously, their movements appeared natural, unconscious. But Marcus could see the pattern. When the Morvani delegate shifted his gaseous form to the left, the Zelkar ambassador adjusted his crystal formation correspondingly. When the human representative from the outer colonies turned her head, a dozen other species turned theirs to match. It was like watching a vast, complex dance where none of the dancers realized they were dancing. Princess Lyra was controlling them all. Not their minds, Marcus realized with growing astonishment. She wasn't forcing them to do anything against their will. Instead, she was connecting them, creating a subtle network of shared consciousness that made them naturally harmonize their movements and responses. For those few minutes, every being in the courtyard was part of a single, unified system. The demonstration lasted only 3 minutes, but, when Princess Lyra lowered her hand, the crowd erupted in the most enthusiastic approval of the day. They didn't understand what had happened, but they all felt an unprecedented sense of connection, of belonging, of unity with the beings around them. Even species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves looking at each other with newfound respect and understanding. Emperor Vextar, however, saw only his daughter standing quietly in the center of the courtyard with no obvious display of power. His displeasure was evident as he dismissed the crowd and stalked back into the palace. Marcus finished his cleaning with hands that shook slightly. Princess Lyra wasn't defective, she was possibly the most powerful psychic entity he had ever encountered. But her abilities were so subtle, so focused on connection rather than domination, that they were invisible to anyone not specifically watching for them. That evening, he found her in the memorial garden. "You saw," she said without turning around. She was kneeling beside one of her mother's bioluminescent plants, her fingers gently adjusting its position to catch the optimal light. "I saw," Marcus confirmed, approaching carefully. "Your Highness, what you did today was a failure, according to my father." She stood, brushing soil from her hands. Another disappointment from the defective princess. "It was the most incredible demonstration of power I've ever witnessed." Princess Lyra turned to study his face in the garden's soft light. "You understand what you saw? You connected them. All of them. For 3 minutes, you turned a courtyard full of separate species into a single, unified consciousness. Partially unified, she corrected. I can't override individual will, and I wouldn't want to. But I can help beings understand each other, feel each other's perspectives, recognize their common ground. When beings are connected, they make better decisions. They see beyond their immediate self-interest. Marcus felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. That's why you've been researching in the archives. You're not just reading about human pattern recognition, you're studying all the species in the Empire. Learning how their minds work, how they connect, what makes them cooperate. The Empire is held together by fear and force, Princess Lyra said, moving to another plant. My father rules through demonstrations of overwhelming power. But that kind of rule only lasts as long as the ruler is stronger than everyone else combined. Eventually, someone more powerful comes along, or the subjugated species develop new technologies, or simple exhaustion sets in. Force-based empires always collapse. But an empire based on actual unity would be stable in ways that a fear-based empire never could be. She finished adjusting the plant and stood. The problem is that most beings in power don't understand the difference between unity and uniformity. They try to make everyone the same instead of helping them work together despite their differences. Marcus thought about his own experience as a human in the galactic community. Humans were often dismissed precisely because they weren't the same as other species, they had no dramatic special abilities, no obvious advantages. But Princess Lyra was right that this dismissal missed something important. Humans were different in ways that could be valuable, if anyone bothered to notice. Is that why you've been talking to me? He asked. Because I'm human? Partially. Princess Lyra began walking along one of the garden's winding paths, and Marcus fell into step beside her. Humans have a particular talent for seeing systems and connections. But, more than that, you've been dismissed and overlooked just like I have. You understand what it's like to have your values systematically ignored. They walked in comfortable silence for several minutes, moving through the carefully arranged memorial plantings. Marcus found himself noticing details he had missed in his regular cleaning, the way certain plants only bloomed in response to others, how the bioluminescence created patterns that told stories in ancient Vextheri script, how the entire garden was actually a complex ecosystem where each element supported all the others. Your mother designed this as a working model, he said suddenly, understanding flooding through him. Princess Lyra stopped walking. What do you mean? The garden. It's not just a memorial, it's a demonstration. All these plants from different worlds, different biological systems, but they've been arranged so that they support each other. The waste products of one species become nutrients for another. The root systems interweave to share resources. Even the light patterns they create together tell a more complete story than any of them could tell alone. My mother believed that diversity was strength, Princess Lyra said softly. She thought the Empire's greatest resource wasn't its military might, but the incredible variety of perspectives and abilities that came from governing 1,000 different species. She wanted to find ways to harness that diversity without destroying it. And your abilities let you do that. You can help different species understand each other without forcing them to become the same. In theory. Princess Lyra resumed walking, but her pace was slower now, more thoughtful. But there's a problem. My abilities only work on a relatively small scale, a few hundred beings at most. To transform something as vast as the Empire, I would need a way to extend that influence across star systems. Marcus considered this challenge as they walked. The Empire spanned thousands of light-years and included billions of conscious beings. Even Princess Lyra's remarkable abilities couldn't reach that far directly. What if you didn't try to reach everyone at once, he suggested. What if you started with smaller groups, but trained them to extend the effect themselves? Princess Lyra stopped again, this time turning to stare at him directly. Explain. You said yourself that humans are good at pattern recognition and adaptation. What if you taught humans how to recognize and facilitate the kinds of connections you can create psychically? We can't do what you do, but we could learn to encourage the same kinds of cooperation and understanding through more conventional means. A network, Princess Lyra said slowly. Not just psychic connection, but practical connection. Beings who understand how to build bridges between different species and cultures. Exactly. And humans would be perfect for that role because we're already seen as harmless and unremarkable. We could work throughout the Empire without triggering the kind of suspicion that dramatic demonstrations of power would create. Princess Lyra was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could almost see her mind working through the implications. When she spoke again, her voice carried a new note of excitement. It could work. A quiet revolution, spreading through practical cooperation instead of conquest. But it would require absolute secrecy, at least at first. My father sees me as a disappointment, but he would see coordinated rebellion as a mortal threat. Then, we make sure he never sees it as rebellion, Marcus said. We make it look like what it really is, beings learning to work together more effectively. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself drawn into a conspiracy unlike anything he had ever imagined. Princess Lyra's failure provided perfect cover for their activities. While her father and brothers focused on obvious displays of power, she and Marcus began building a network of understanding that operated entirely below the radar of imperial attention. It started small. Marcus used his position as cleaning staff to observe the daily interactions between different species in the palace. He identified points of friction and misunderstanding, then shared his observations with Princess Lyra during their regular meetings in the memorial garden. She would use her abilities to create brief moments of connection between specific individuals, helping them understand each other's perspectives just long enough to resolve minor conflicts. The effects were subtle but noticeable. Diplomatic meetings that had been tense became more productive. Species that had maintained careful distance from each other began finding common ground. The overall atmosphere in the palace became more collaborative, though no one could quite explain why. More importantly, the beings who experienced these moments of connection began seeking out similar experiences on their own. Ambassador Zelkar started arranging his crystal formations in patterns that other species found calming rather than intimidating. The Morvani delegate began modulating his gaseous form to communicate emotional states more clearly. The human representatives started organizing informal discussion groups where different species could share their perspectives on common challenges. None of them realized they were being guided, but they all felt the benefits of increased understanding and cooperation. Within a month, Princess Lyra and Marcus had identified a dozen individuals from different species who showed particular aptitude for cross-cultural communication. These beings became the first nodes in their growing network, though most of them never realized they were part of something larger. The human representatives were the easiest to recruit directly. Marcus approached them during routine maintenance visits to their quarters, sharing observations about interspecies dynamics and suggesting ways they might facilitate better communication. Humans, with their natural tendency toward pattern recognition and adaptation, proved remarkably effective at recognizing and addressing sources of conflict between other species. But the real breakthrough came when Princess Lyra demonstrated that her abilities could be temporarily shared. "I can't give you psychic powers," she explained during one of their late-night meetings in the archives. "But I can help you understand what psychic connection feels like, so you can recognize it and encourage it in others." The experience was unlike anything Marcus had ever felt. For 10 minutes, he could sense the emotional states and basic thoughts of everyone in the palace. More than that, he could feel the connections between them, the webs of friendship, rivalry, cooperation, and conflict that shaped their daily interactions. He understood, with perfect clarity, which relationships were strong and which were fragile, which conflicts were based on genuine disagreement and which were simply misunderstandings. When the connection faded, Marcus retained enough understanding to recognize the same patterns without psychic assistance. He could read the subtle cues that indicated when beings were feeling isolated or misunderstood, and he knew how to encourage the kinds of interactions that would build bridges instead of walls. "This is how you've been seeing the palace all along," he said, amazed. "Now you can see it too," Princess Lyra replied. "And, more importantly, you can teach others to see it." By the end of the second month, their network had grown to include 57 individuals from 18 different species, spread across 4 different sectors of the palace. None of them knew the full scope of what they were building, but all of them understood that they were part of something that made their daily lives better. The human contingent had become particularly effective at identifying and resolving conflicts before they escalated. Ambassador Tkari from the Reptilian Confederation, who had initially dismissed humans as irrelevant, found herself regularly consulting with human staff members when dealing with complex interspecies disputes. "Your people have an unusual gift," she told Marcus during one such consultation. "You see patterns that others miss. Perhaps we have been too quick to judge your species' value to the galactic community." Marcus simply smiled and continued his work, knowing that Ambassador Tkari was experiencing exactly the kind of shift in perspective that Princess Lyra was trying to encourage throughout the Empire. But their success also brought new dangers. The more effective their network became, the more likely it was to attract attention from those who benefited from the Empire's current power structure. That attention came sooner than either of them expected. The first sign of trouble came from an unexpected source: Prince Morval's fascination with temporal anomalies. Marcus was cleaning the strategic planning chamber when he overheard the conversation between the Emperor's eldest son and Grand Admiral Kethran. Prince Morval had been investigating unusual patterns in the palace's recent diplomatic successes, and his temporal manipulation abilities had revealed something disturbing. "The probability curves don't match historical patterns," Prince Morval was explaining, his voice carrying the characteristic harmonic undertones that indicated deep concentration. "According to my analysis of past interactions, the Zelkar and Morvani should have reached a state of open conflict by now. The Reptilian Confederation should have withdrawn their trade agreements 3 weeks ago. The human representatives should still be struggling with basic protocol violations. Perhaps the species are simply learning to work together more effectively," Grand Admiral Kethran suggested, though his tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. "That's exactly what concerns me," Prince Morval replied. "Learning curves don't typically demonstrate sudden, coordinated improvement across multiple species simultaneously. Something is facilitating these changes, and I intend to discover what." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Prince Morval's temporal abilities allowed him to perceive changes in probability patterns across time, essentially seeing the likelihood of different outcomes shifting in response to unknown influences. If he was systematically investigating those shifts, it was only a matter of time before he traced them back to Princess Lyra's interventions. That evening, Marcus found Princess Lyra in the archives, surrounded by even more books than usual. Her expression was troubled, and the air around her shimmered with the barely controlled energy that indicated emotional distress. "You heard," she said without looking up from her reading. "Your brother is investigating the diplomatic improvements. He's noticed that the probability patterns don't match normal relationship development." Princess Lyra closed the book she was reading and leaned back in her chair. "I knew this would happen eventually. Morval has always been too clever for his own good, and his temporal perception makes it nearly impossible to hide systematic changes from him. What do? We prepare for exposure," she said simply. "And we hope that what we've built is strong enough to survive it." Marcus felt a chill of fear. "What happens when your father finds out what you've been doing?" Princess Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her shifting eyes reflecting colors he had never seen before, deep purples and silvers that seemed to move like liquid metal. "My father believes that strength comes from the ability to dominate others," she finally said. "He sees cooperation as weakness, shared power as a threat to his authority. If he discovers that I've been facilitating genuine cooperation between species, he'll interpret it as preparation for rebellion." Even though it's not? Even though it's not. She stood and began pacing between the reading stations. "He won't see a network designed to create understanding and prevent conflicts. He'll see a conspiracy that undermines his power by making his subjects less dependent on his ability to resolve their disputes through force." Marcus thought about this, trying to understand the full implications. Emperor Vextar ruled through a combination of overwhelming personal power and the careful maintenance of tensions between subject species. If those species could resolve their conflicts independently, if they could work together effectively without imperial mediation, the emperor's role would become less essential. It is a threat to his power, Marcus realized aloud. Not an intentional rebellion, but a fundamental change in how the empire operates. Exactly. And that makes it more dangerous than an open revolt, because it's sustainable in ways that force-based resistance never could be. Over the following days, Marcus watched Prince Morval's investigation intensify. The Emperor's eldest son began appearing in areas of the palace where he had never shown interest before, observing interactions between different species with the focused attention of a predator studying prey. His temporal abilities allowed him to perceive the exact moments when relationships shifted, when conflicts resolved more easily than they should have, when cooperation emerged from situations that should have produced tension. Marcus found himself being studied with particular intensity during one of his cleaning shifts. Prince Morval materialized directly in front of him, using his space-folding abilities to appear without warning. "Human," Prince Morval said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to press against Marcus's mind like cold fingers. "You have been present during several temporal anomalies." "I'm sorry, Your Highness?" Marcus maintained his position, mop in hand, trying to project nothing more than confused servitude. "Conflicts that resolved more easily than they should have. Cooperation that emerged from situations with low probability curves. You were cleaning nearby during each incident." Marcus felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead. Prince Morval's temporal perception meant he could literally see the moments when probability shifted, when unlikely outcomes became likely ones. If Princess Lyra had used her abilities while Marcus was present, Prince Morval could trace those moments back to specific times and locations. "I just clean, Your Highness. I don't understand politics or diplomacy." Prince Morval stepped closer, and Marcus caught the scent of ozone and something else, something that smelled like the moment just before lightning strikes. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you understand more than you pretend." Prince Morval raised his hand, and Marcus felt time itself shifting around him. Suddenly, he could perceive the last 3 weeks as a continuous flow, seeing his own actions from an outside perspective. Every conversation with Princess Lyra, every moment when he had shared observations about interspecies dynamics, every time he had facilitated better communication between different beings. But the temporal perception also showed him something else. Princess Lyra had been extremely careful. Her psychic interventions were so subtle, so perfectly timed to coincide with natural moments of potential understanding, that they appeared to be nothing more than fortunate coincidences. Without the ability to perceive psychic energy directly, Prince Morval could see the effects but not the cause. When the temporal shift ended, Marcus found himself back in the normal flow of time, still standing with his mop while Prince Morval studied his face. "Interesting," Prince Morval murmured. "You genuinely don't understand the scope of what's happening, do you? You see the patterns, you facilitate better communication, but you don't realize you're part of a larger system." Marcus remained silent, uncertain whether agreeing or disagreeing would be more dangerous. "No matter," Prince Morval continued. "Your role is irrelevant compared to the larger question of who is orchestrating these changes." He turned to leave, then paused. "Human." "Yes, Your Highness?" "If you discover anything unusual, anything that might explain the recent improvements in interspecies cooperation, you will report it to me immediately. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Highness." Prince Morval vanished, folding space to transport himself elsewhere in the palace, leaving Marcus standing alone with the crushing weight of approaching disaster. That night, Princess Lyra made a decision that changed everything. "We're going to reveal ourselves," she announced when Marcus met her in the memorial garden. "What?" Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "Princess, if your father finds out, my father is going to find out regardless," she interrupted. "Morval is too persistent, and his abilities are too well suited for this kind of investigation. We can either wait for him to expose us in the worst possible light, or we can control the revelation ourselves." "How do we control something like this?" Princess Lyra gestured toward the garden around them, with its intricate ecosystem of plants from across the galaxy. "By demonstrating that what we've built actually works. By showing the Emperor and the court that cooperation produces better results than conflict." "And if your father decides that cooperation is a threat to his authority?" "Then, we'll deal with that when it happens. But if we can prove that our approach strengthens the Empire rather than weakening it, if we can show him that connected species are more loyal and productive than fearful ones, he might be willing to consider a different path." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to avoid the confrontation that seemed inevitable, but he could see the logic in Princess Lyra's position. Prince Morval's investigation was closing in on them, and their network had grown large enough that hiding it much longer would be impossible. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "I need you to be human," she said simply. "I need you to demonstrate what your species does best, seeing patterns, adapting to new situations, building bridges between different groups. Tomorrow, during the quarterly trade negotiations, I'm going to reveal my abilities to the entire court. When the inevitable chaos begins, I need you to help everyone understand what they're witnessing." The quarterly trade negotiations were the Empire's most complex diplomatic event, bringing together representatives from 50 different species to establish economic policy for the next 3 months. The negotiations typically took days of heated argument and careful maneuvering, with the Emperor serving as final arbiter for disputes that couldn't be resolved through conventional diplomatic channels. Marcus arrived early to clean the Great Council chamber, but his real purpose was to observe and prepare. The chamber was arranged in concentric circles, with the most powerful species occupying the inner rings and smaller delegations positioned toward the outside. Each species had brought their standard negotiation materials, translation devices, cultural advisors, economic projections, and, in some cases, weapons that served as reminders of their military capabilities. As the delegations assembled, Marcus could see the familiar patterns of tension and mistrust. The Zelkar delegation arranged their crystals in defensive formations. The Morvani representatives maintained maximum distance from species that required solid environmental conditions. The human delegation, as always, positioned themselves near the back, ready to serve as neutral mediators if needed. Emperor Vextar presided from the central dais, his bioluminescent patches flickering in patterns that commanded attention and respect. Prince Zyxtar and Prince Morval flanked him, ready to demonstrate imperial power if any delegation proved too difficult to manage through conventional diplomacy. Princess Lyra was not on the dais. Marcus spotted her near the outer ring, standing with a group of minor species representatives who were usually ignored during the early phases of negotiation. The proceedings began normally, with each major species presenting their economic demands and trading positions. The Kethani wanted increased access to rare mineral deposits. The Zelkar demanded better protection for their crystal merchant vessels. The Morvani sought exclusive rights to gas giant harvesting in 3 systems. The demands were, as usual, contradictory and impossible to satisfy simultaneously. Marcus watched the familiar pattern unfold, initial presentations giving way to arguments, arguments escalating to accusations, accusations building toward the kind of deadlock that would require imperial intervention to resolve. But, as the tensions increased, Princess Lyra began moving through the chamber. She started with the minor species in the outer ring, the delegates who were usually overlooked or dismissed during major negotiations. As she spoke quietly with each group, Marcus noticed subtle changes in their posture and positioning. They began paying attention to each other's presentations instead of simply waiting for their turn to speak. They started identifying common concerns and shared interests. Then, Princess Lyra moved to the middle ring, engaging with species that had moderate but not overwhelming influence. Again, her presence seemed to create understanding where confusion had existed before. Delegations that had been preparing contradictory demands began finding ways to align their positions. The changes were subtle enough that most observers attributed them to standard diplomatic maneuvering, but Marcus could see the pattern. Princess Lyra was weaving connections throughout the chamber, creating a web of understanding that encompassed every delegation present. When she finally approached the inner ring where the major powers were debating, she had already transformed the entire negotiation environment. The minor and moderate species were no longer passive observers waiting for the powerful delegations to make decisions for them. They had become active participants with clear positions and coordinated strategies. Emperor Vextar noticed the change when Ambassador Zelkar suddenly withdrew his demand for exclusive trading rights and instead proposed a resource-sharing agreement that would benefit 12 different species simultaneously. The Emperor's bioluminescent patches flickered in confusion. This was not how negotiations typically proceeded. "What manner of diplomacy is this?" the Emperor demanded. That's when Princess Lyra stepped into the center of the chamber. "It's cooperative diplomacy, Father," she said. Then, Emperor Vextar's voice rang out, filled with a rage that made the chamber's crystalline walls resonate like struck bells. "Treason!" The word echoed through the Great Council chamber like a physical blow. Emperor Vextar rose from his throne, bioluminescent patches blazing with patterns Marcus had never seen before, complex geometries of rage and authority that seemed to burn the air itself. Guards, the Emperor commanded, his voice harmonizing into frequencies that made several species physically recoil. Arrest the traitor princess. But something unprecedented happened. The guards hesitated. Not because they were unwilling to follow orders, but because they were still connected to Princess Lyra's psychic network. For the first time in their lives, they could feel the Emperor's emotions directly, not just his rage, but the fear underneath it. They could sense his genuine terror at seeing his subjects understand each other instead of requiring his mediation. They felt his desperate need to maintain control, even at the cost of destroying something beautiful. More importantly, they could feel the emotions of every being in the chamber. The Zelkar delegation's amazement at finally being understood by species they had considered incomprehensible. The Morvani representatives' relief at finding common ground with solid matter species they had always seen as fundamentally alien. The human delegation's quiet satisfaction at seeing their own approach to diplomacy validated on a galactic scale. The guards looked at Princess Lyra, then at their emperor, then at the 50 delegations who were experiencing unprecedented unity, and they could not bring themselves to destroy what they were witnessing. Prince ZYXstar stepped forward, reality folding around him as he prepared to use his space manipulation abilities. If the guards won't act, I will handle this myself. But, before he could move against his sister, Marcus stepped between them. Wait, he said, his voice somehow carrying clearly through the massive chamber despite being nothing more than human vocal cords against alien acoustics. Every eye in the room turned toward him, a human janitor presuming to interrupt imperial family conflict. Emperor Vexstar's rage found a new target. Silence, human. You have no place in this, with respect, your imperial majesty, Marcus interrupted, his heart hammering but his voice steady. I have every place in this. Because what Princess Lyra has shown us today isn't treason. It's the solution to the Empire's greatest weakness. The Emperor's bioluminescent pattern shifted to configurations that suggested Marcus would be vaporized within seconds, but Princess Lyra's psychic network was still active, still allowing everyone present to feel the truth behind his words. Explain, demanded Prince Morval, his temporal perception showing him probability streams that branched wildly from this moment. What weakness? Marcus took a deep breath, drawing on everything he had learned about pattern recognition, about seeing systems that others missed. The Empire rules through fear, but fear-based systems are inherently unstable. They require constant demonstrations of power to maintain control. They waste enormous resources on surveillance and enforcement. Most importantly, they prevent the very cooperation that would make the Empire stronger. He gestured toward the delegations around them. Look at what just happened here. 50 species found common ground on issues that usually take weeks to resolve. Not because anyone was forced to compromise, but because they finally understood each other's actual needs and concerns. Understanding breeds weakness, Emperor Vexstar declared, though Marcus could sense uncertainty creeping into the Emperor's emotional state through the psychic network. Unity undermines proper hierarchy. Does it? Marcus asked. Or does it create a different kind of strength? He turned to address the entire chamber, drawing on his experience as a human who had spent years observing interspecies dynamics. Every species here has capabilities that others lack. The Zelkar can process information in ways that organic minds can't match. The Morvani can survive in environments that would kill most other beings. Humans are good at recognizing patterns and facilitating communication. But we've never combined those capabilities effectively because we've been too busy maintaining artificial hierarchies. Ambassador Zelkar suddenly crystallized into a formation that Marcus had learned indicated deep consideration. The human speaks of symbiosis rather than subjugation. Symbiosis is weakness, Prince ZYXstar interjected, though his spacefolding abilities remained inactive. Through the psychic network, Marcus could feel the prince's confusion. He had expected to feel disgust at his sister's actions, but instead he was experiencing the same sense of connection and possibility that affected everyone else in the chamber. Is it? Marcus challenged. Let me show you something. He walked to the center of the chamber, where Princess Lyra stood surrounded by the visible manifestation of her psychic abilities. The air around her still shimmered with the connections she had created, making the web of understanding visible to everyone present. I'm just a human, Marcus said, projecting his voice to the entire assembly. No special abilities, no impressive powers, nothing that would traditionally be considered valuable in this empire. But Princess Lyra recognized something that everyone else missed. I could see patterns that others overlooked. I could help beings understand each other in ways that raw power never could. He gestured to the various delegations around them. Over the past 2 months, Her Highness and I have been facilitating small improvements in communication throughout the palace. Not forcing anyone to do anything, not overriding anyone's will, just helping beings understand each other better. The result has been the most productive diplomatic period in the Empire's recent history. Marcus could see Emperor Vextar's expression shifting as the implications became clear. Through the psychic network, the Emperor was being forced to confront the actual results of his daughter's defective abilities. "You're saying," Prince Morval said slowly, his temporal perception allowing him to see the probability curves more clearly now, "that cooperation produces better outcomes than coercion?" "I'm saying that the Empire has never tried cooperative governance," Marcus replied. "You've assumed that different species couldn't work together effectively, so you never created systems that would allow them to try. But what we've seen today suggests that assumption was wrong." Ambassador Tari from the Reptilian Confederation raised her scaled head. "The human raises an intriguing point. Our recent trade discussions have been remarkably productive, and I had attributed this to improved diplomatic protocols. But if there were other factors..." "There were," Princess Lyra said, finally, speaking again. "I facilitated connections between different delegations, helped them understand each other's perspectives and needs. But I didn't override anyone's will or force any decisions. I simply made genuine communication possible." The chamber erupted in discussion as delegations began comparing their recent experiences, recognizing patterns they had missed before. But Marcus noticed that Emperor Vextar remained silent, his bioluminescent patterns cycling through configurations that suggested deep internal conflict. "Father," Princess Lyra said, approaching the imperial dais while maintaining the psychic network that connected everyone present, "I know this challenges everything you believe about governance. But look around you. See what happens when your subjects truly understand each other." Marcus watched the Emperor's face as he processed what he was experiencing through the psychic connection. For the first time in his reign, Emperor Vextar could feel the genuine emotions and thoughts of his subjects. Their loyalty wasn't based on fear, it was based on respect for the stability and order he provided. Their conflicts weren't rooted in fundamental incompatibility, they arose from misunderstandings that could be resolved through patient communication. More profoundly, he could feel their potential. The incredible diversity of perspectives and abilities that he had been suppressing in the name of maintaining order. The innovations and solutions that could emerge if these species were allowed to work together effectively. "This is impossible," the Emperor whispered, but his words lacked conviction. "It's happening right now," Marcus said gently. "Your Majesty, you've spent your reign preventing chaos, maintaining order through superior force. But what if there was a way to maintain order through genuine cooperation? What if your subjects wanted to work together, but simply didn't know how?" Prince Zyxtar stepped forward, his expression troubled. "Father, I can feel it too. Through sisters' connection, I can sense their thoughts and emotions. They're not plotting rebellion or seeking to overthrow imperial authority. They want the Empire to succeed, they just want to contribute more meaningfully to that success." "And they can," Princess Lyra added. "Imagine what we could accomplish if we harnessed the full potential of every species in the Empire. Not just their compliance, but their creativity, their unique perspectives, their specialized abilities working in coordination rather than competition." Emperor Vextar stood silently for long minutes, the psychic network allowing everyone in the chamber to feel his internal struggle. Centuries of believing that strength meant domination warred against the evidence of what he was experiencing, subjects who were more loyal and productive when they felt understood and valued. Finally, he spoke. "Even if this cooperation is possible, how could it be maintained? Your abilities can only reach so far, daughter. The Empire spans thousands of systems." Marcus felt a surge of excitement. The Emperor wasn't rejecting the concept, he was asking practical questions about implementation. "We've already begun building a solution," Princess Lyra said. "A network of beings trained in cross-cultural communication and conflict resolution. species like humans, who excel at pattern recognition and adaptive problem solving. They can facilitate the same kinds of understanding and cooperation in systems throughout the Empire. A shadow government, Prince Morval said, his temporal perception showing him the possible futures that branched from this moment. Not shadow, Marcus corrected. Supplemental. Supporting your existing authority structure by making it more effective. Instead of ruling through fear and force, you could rule through genuine leadership, helping your subjects achieve their full potential rather than simply preventing them from causing problems. The discussion that followed was unlike anything in the Empire's history. For 3 hours, 50 species debated governance philosophy while connected through Princess Lyra's psychic network. They could feel each other's concerns, understand the reasoning behind different positions, and work toward solutions that addressed everyone's needs. The human delegation, led by representatives Marcus had been working with for months, demonstrated their species' unique value by serving as facilitators and mediators. They couldn't match the raw power of other species, but their ability to see patterns and encourage cooperation proved invaluable in navigating complex multi-species discussions. As the debate progressed, Marcus noticed something remarkable happening to Emperor Vextar. The psychic connection was allowing him to experience leadership from an entirely new perspective. Instead of being isolated on his throne, making decisions based on incomplete information, he was part of a vast network of consciousness that included every perspective and concern in his empire. For the first time in his reign, he truly understood what his subjects needed from him. This will require significant changes to imperial policy, the emperor finally said. New training programs, restructured diplomatic protocols, different approaches to conflict resolution. Yes, Princess Lyra agreed. But the changes would strengthen your authority rather than undermining it. Instead of ruling through fear of your power, you would rule through respect for your wisdom and effectiveness. Marcus felt a moment of profound hope. The emperor was considering a fundamental transformation of how the empire operated. But, then, Prince Zyxtar raised a question that changed everything. What about species that refuse to cooperate? What about external threats? Cooperation is valuable, but there will always be situations that require force. The chamber fell silent as everyone considered this challenge. Princess Lyra's psychic network had created unprecedented unity within the Empire, but the galaxy contained threats that couldn't be resolved through understanding and communication. Emperor Vextar's expression grew thoughtful. "Show me," he said to his daughter. "Prove that this cooperative approach can handle the kinds of challenges that have always required imperial force." Princess Lyra looked uncertain for the first time since revealing her abilities. "What do you mean, father?" "The Devourers," the emperor said simply, and Marcus felt the psychic network suddenly fill with fear and dread from every species present. The machine intelligence that has been consuming systems on the outer rim. They don't communicate, they don't negotiate, they simply destroy and assimilate. How does your cooperation address that threat? Marcus realized that this was the moment that would determine everything. Princess Lyra's abilities were extraordinary, and the network she had built was impressive, but could it handle a threat that couldn't be reasoned with or understood? The answer would reshape the future of the galaxy. The mention of the Devourers sent a chill of terror through the psychic network that Princess Lyra had maintained. Marcus felt the collective fear of 50 species as they contemplated the machine intelligence that had been systematically consuming outer rim systems for the past 18 months. Unlike every other threat the Empire had faced, the Devourers didn't negotiate, didn't communicate, and didn't seem to want anything other than the complete assimilation of organic life. "Father," Princess Lyra said carefully, "the Devourers represent exactly the kind of external threat where cooperation becomes most valuable. No single species has the capabilities to counter their technology effectively." "We have tried coordination," Prince Morval interjected, his temporal perception allowing him to see the tactical failures of previous engagements. 12 different fleet actions, each incorporating multiple species' capabilities. The Devourers adapted to every strategy we employed. Marcus felt an idea forming as he processed the information flowing through the psychic network. The various military commanders present were sharing their experiences with Devourer encounters, and a pattern was emerging that human pattern recognition could identify where others might miss it. Your Imperial Majesty, Marcus said, stepping forward despite knowing he was presuming to address matters far beyond his station. May I ask what strategies have been attempted against the Devourers? Emperor Vextar's bioluminescent patterns flickered with irritation. Military strategy is not the concern of cleaning staff, human. But Princess Lyra's psychic network was still active, and, through it, the Emperor could sense Marcus's genuine insight rather than presumptuous interference. After a moment of internal conflict, the Emperor gestured for him to continue. We have employed standard Imperial tactics, Grand Admiral Kethron said, his diplomatic training making him more willing to engage with questions from unexpected sources. Overwhelming force, coordinated fleet movements, strategic targeting of key infrastructure. Each engagement follows established protocols for maximum effectiveness. That's the pattern, Marcus said, excitement building as the connections became clear. Established protocols. Predictable strategies. The Devourers are a machine intelligence, they excel at analyzing patterns and developing countermeasures. Every time you use the same approaches that worked against organic enemies, you're giving them data to optimize their responses. Through the psychic network, he could feel understanding beginning to dawn among the military commanders. But Admiral Zhkath of the Kethani 7th Fleet remained skeptical. What alternative do you propose, human? Chaos? Random tactics without coordination? Not chaos, Marcus replied, his mind racing as he saw the possibilities that human adaptive thinking could offer. Unpredictability. The one thing machine intelligences struggle with is genuinely creative problem solving. They can optimize responses to known patterns, but they have difficulty with approaches they've never encountered. Princess Lyra's eyes brightened with understanding. You're suggesting that our diversity is our advantage. Instead of trying to coordinate different species into a single, predictable strategy, we let each species contribute their unique capabilities in ways the Devourers can't anticipate. Exactly, Marcus said. The Zelkar process information faster than any organic mind, but they think in crystalline logic patterns. The Morvani can survive in environments that would destroy most technology, but they operate according to gaseous dynamics. Humans are mediocre at everything but excellent at adapting existing solutions to new problems. Every species thinks differently, approaches problems from different angles. Emperor Vextar leaned forward on his throne. Continue. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing he was about to propose something that challenged every military doctrine the Empire had ever employed. Instead of trying to coordinate everyone into a single strategy, what if we created multiple, simultaneous approaches that complement each other without following predictable patterns? Let the Zelkar develop computational attacks against Devourer systems. Let the Morvani infiltrate their technology from angles the machines never expect. Let humans coordinate adaptive responses that change based on real-time observation. Multiple uncoordinated attacks would result in chaos, Prince Zyxtar objected. Friendly fire, conflicting objectives, wasted resources. Not uncoordinated, Princess Lyra said, her psychic abilities beginning to shimmer more brightly around her. Connected but not controlled. What if I could link military commanders across multiple fleets, allowing them to share information and adapt to each other's actions without forcing them into a single rigid plan? The military commanders throughout the chamber suddenly focused with laser intensity. Through the psychic network, Marcus could feel their minds working through the implications. Real-time coordination without predetermined tactics. The ability to adapt instantly to changing battlefield conditions. Information sharing that was faster than any technological communication system. The Devourers would be facing an enemy they couldn't predict or model, Admiral Zhkath realized. Every engagement would present new variables, new approaches, new solutions they had never encountered before. But the risk, Grand Admiral Kethron said. If Princess Lyra's psychic coordination fails during battle, then we fall back to conventional tactics, Marcus said. But if it works, we finally have an advantage that the Devourers can't simply analyze and counter. Emperor Vextar stood, his bioluminescent patterns cycling through configurations that indicated deep consideration. Through Princess Lyra's network, Marcus could feel the Emperor's mind working through the implications not just for the current crisis, but for the future of Imperial governance. You propose to test this cooperative approach against our most dangerous enemy, the Emperor said slowly. If it fails, entire systems could be lost. If we continue with conventional approaches, entire systems will definitely be lost, Princess Lyra replied. Father, the Devourers have adapted to everything we've tried. Our choice isn't between safety and risk, it's between certain failure and possible success. The debate that followed was intense but remarkably productive. Through the psychic network, every participant could share information, concerns, and ideas without the usual barriers of species prejudice or hierarchical intimidation. Military commanders who had never spoken directly to each other before began developing collaborative strategies that incorporated capabilities they had only heard rumors about. Marcus found himself serving as a translator and facilitator, helping different species understand each other's tactical concepts. The Zelkar thought in terms of crystalline matrices and probability cascades. The Morvani conceived of battlefield dynamics as flowing gases seeking equilibrium. Humans visualized conflict as adaptive problems requiring creative solutions. Separately, these approaches were incompatible. Connected through Princess Lyra's psychic network and facilitated by human pattern recognition, they became complementary aspects of a larger strategy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The plan that emerged was audaciously complex. 3 separate fleets would approach the latest Devourer incursion from different vectors, each employing tactics specific to their species' capabilities. The Zelkar would launch computational viruses designed to overload Devourer processing systems. The Morvani would infiltrate Devourer ships through ventilation systems and begin corrupting their technology from within. Human crews would coordinate adaptive responses, changing tactics in real time based on Devourer reactions. Most importantly, Princess Lyra would maintain psychic contact with all 3 fleets, allowing instant communication and coordination while preserving each group's ability to act according to their natural strengths. This is unprecedented, Emperor Vextar said when the planning session concluded. In 1,000 years of Imperial governance, no battle has been fought this way. Because no battle has ever needed to be fought this way, Marcus replied. The Devourers represent a threat unlike anything the Empire has faced before. They require a response unlike anything the Empire has attempted before. Emperor Vextar's bioluminescent patterns shifted to configurations Marcus had never seen, complex geometries that seemed to indicate a fundamental change in thinking. If this succeeds, the Emperor said slowly, it will prove that cooperative governance can handle even the most extreme challenges. But, if it fails, it will demonstrate that unity and understanding are inadequate when facing genuine threats. Father, Princess Lyra said, approaching the imperial dais while maintaining the psychic network that connected everyone in the chamber, either way, we'll know the truth about whether the Empire can evolve beyond rule through fear. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the palace's strategic command center, watching holographic displays that showed 3 fleets approaching the Devourer incursion in the Tertius system. He was there not as cleaning staff, but as a human pattern recognition specialist assigned to coordinate adaptive responses during the battle. Princess Lyra stood in the center of the command center, her psychic abilities extended across light years to connect with the fleet commanders. The psychic network that had begun in the palace's memorial garden now encompassed thousands of beings across dozens of ships, creating the largest cooperative consciousness in galactic history. Emperor Vextar, Prince Zyxtar, and Prince Morval watched from the command platform, their expressions reflecting the magnitude of what was at stake. If this failed, it would validate everything the Empire had believed about the necessity of authoritarian control. If it succeeded, it would transform the galaxy's understanding of what diverse species could accomplish together. Fleet Alpha entering engagement range, reported Admiral ZH Cath, her voice coming through both technological communication systems and Princess Lyra's psychic network. Fleet Beta beginning infiltration protocols, added Admiral Morvani 7th Flow, the gaseous being's communication translated through both mechanical and psychic channels. Fleet Gamma standing by for adaptive response coordination, confirmed Admiral Sarah Chen, the first human ever to command an Imperial fleet. Marcus watched the tactical displays as the engagement began. The Devourers responded exactly as expected, launching their standard defensive patterns and beginning to analyze the attacking fleet's capabilities. But, for the first time, they were facing an enemy that wasn't following predictable patterns. The Zelkar computational attacks overwhelmed the Devourers' initial processing attempts, but, instead of pressing the advantage conventionally, Fleet Alpha immediately shifted to support Fleet Beta's infiltration efforts. The Morvani had penetrated 3 Devourer ships and were corrupting their systems from within, but, instead of continuing their individual missions, they began coordinating with Fleet Gamma to create openings for human adaptive strikes. Most remarkably, all 3 fleets were adapting to each other's actions in real time through Princess Lyra's psychic network. When the Devourers began countering the Zelkar attacks, the Morvani immediately adjusted their infiltration patterns to exploit the newly created vulnerabilities. When Devourer defenses adapted to gaseous intrusion, human crews developed novel approaches that combined both crystalline logic and fluid dynamics in ways the machines had never encountered. "It's working," Marcus breathed, watching the tactical displays show something unprecedented. The Devourers were losing. Not just failing to achieve their objectives, but actually being pushed back by an enemy they couldn't predict or counter. Every time they adapted to one aspect of the cooperative attack, 2 other aspects evolved in response to their countermeasures. Through Princess Lyra's psychic network, Marcus could feel the amazement and growing confidence of thousands of beings who were discovering what they could accomplish when they truly worked together. Species that had been rivals for centuries were coordinating their actions with precision that exceeded their individual capabilities. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Devourer incursion had been completely eliminated for the first time since the machine intelligence had appeared on the galactic stage. Emperor Vextar stood silently for long minutes, processing what he had witnessed through both traditional observation and psychic connection. Finally, he spoke. "In 1,000 years of imperial rule, we have maintained order through superior force and careful management of our subjects' conflicts. Today, we have discovered that our subjects are capable of far more than we ever imagined." He turned to Princess Lyra, his bioluminescent patterns shifting to configurations that indicated profound respect. "Daughter, you are not defective. You possess the most valuable ability any ruler could have, the power to help others achieve their full potential." Princess Lyra smiled, and the psychic network that connected them all pulsed with warmth and possibility. "Father, this is just the beginning. What we've accomplished today proves that the Empire's greatest resource isn't its military might or its political structure. It's the incredible diversity of its people and their willingness to work together when they truly understand each other." Marcus felt a profound sense of satisfaction as he watched Emperor Vextar formally announce the implementation of cooperative governance protocols throughout the Empire. Human pattern recognition specialists would be trained and deployed to every system, helping facilitate communication and understanding between different species. Princess Lyra would establish a psychic communication network that would eventually connect the entire Empire, allowing unprecedented coordination and cooperation. Most importantly, the Empire would begin governing through leadership rather than domination, helping its diverse subjects achieve their collective potential rather than simply preventing them from causing problems. As the formal ceremonies concluded and the command center began returning to normal operations, Princess Lyra approached Marcus with that same intentional grace he had noticed during their first conversation. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what, Your Highness?" "For seeing me," she replied. "For recognizing that different doesn't mean defective. For helping me understand that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy isn't any special ability, it's your capacity to see potential where others see only problems." Marcus smiled, thinking about his grandmother's words about the danger of writing off anyone too early. In trying to help Princess Lyra achieve her potential, he had accidentally discovered his own. "Your Highness," he said, "I think we helped each other." As they stood together in the command center, surrounded by the evidence of what diverse beings could accomplish when they truly understood each other, Marcus realized that this was exactly what humanity was meant to contribute to the galactic community. Not domination or intimidation, but recognition and facilitation. The ability to see connections where others saw only differences, to build bridges where others built walls. The Empire would never be the same. And, across the galaxy, overlooked beings of every species would finally have the chance to show what they were truly capable of achieving. In the end, the most powerful force in the universe wasn't the ability to destroy or dominate. It was the simple act of seeing others for who they truly were, and helping them become who they were meant to be. That was humanity's gift to the stars. That was why they mattered. That was the true meaning of HFY humanity, F***K. Yeah.